Deborah Walk, curator of the Circus Museum, says this spectacular car was a huge step up from the wagon train days of the greatest show on earth.
It's very hard for us to appreciate the event of the circus coming to town. Basically, at the turn of 1900, we had three major holidays: Christmas, the 4th of July, and when the circus came to town.
The 79-foot-long, 65-ton Pullman car is named the Wisconsin, after the Ringlings' home state.
John Ringling was the advance person. He would make sure all the contracts were in line so that when the show came to town, there was no doubt, no problem.
John and his wife Mabel used the lavish rail car to travel across the country from 1905 to 1916.
This was his car. It wasn't owned by the circus.
The Wisconsin is a picture of elegance and design. John Ringling hand-picked everything inside, from the rich inlaid mahogany walls to the ornate moldings, to the detailed stained glass windows, even the gold leaf trimmed ceilings. And the cast iron kitchen was state-of-the-art for its time. But this grand old car was more than just derailed after John Ringling sold it in 1916. It was nearly destroyed, and Deborah Walk took a video camera on board to document the damage.
This is the dining room, all original. This wonderful Fabergé jewel of a car was used as a fishing camp in Moores Head City, North Carolina.
Thankfully, the car was saved just in the nick of time.
We had water damage in this part?
Yeah, and that's why this has not been worked on at all. It's because they were afraid it was going to drop and we would lose all the decorative work. Just imagine, if you can, these walls painted a white, 7 layers of paint on it. When I came in for the first time, it was all boarded up, so you couldn't see anything. And this was the only piece of the work that was available to look at. You couldn't see anything of this beautiful mahogany except for the one piece of marquetry, which is over my shoulder.
But that patch of mahogany heaven was just enough to keep hope alive that the Wisconsin could be saved. But it wasn't just the walls. These beautiful ceilings were also smothered in thick white paint.
And so the ceilings were sanded down very carefully, just like in the tree rings, going back, looking at the different colors, getting to the gesso stage, and realized the next paint up was the color that the ceilings were originally done. When we got that work done, then we brought it here to the Ringling Museum. And that was a process in itself. Because we're in a building, 180 feet of rail had to be laid to bring the car from the outside inside.
Once inside the Ringling Museum in Sarasota, Florida, there was no turning back.
I walked in and realized that in spite of the lime green shag carpet, that this was a project that had to be taken on.
Look at this.
Isn't this beautiful? It just exudes two people, John and Mabel Ringling.
More than $400,000 was spent to bring the Wisconsin back to life. The restoration was meticulous in detail and history.
We were able to get the blueprints. We were able to find builders' photos.
The beautiful, detailed moldings on either side of the ceiling had been cut in half. A team of artists hand-made special resin molds to magically piece them back together. But they might have had a little help from above.
I really do think that the Ringlings are looking down over our shoulder, because even though they destroyed all of the medallions going through the car, we had a left and we had a right, and so that we could put the medallions back together again.
The The crew that meticulously put the Wisconsin back together left no detail undone, right down to the carpet.
The rug you will see is a reproduction that was made by the same company in England, the Wilton Company. And so we were able to find a 1909 carpet sample, of all places, eBay, and be able to have it rewoven to give this real sense of warmth and color that the car has.
With all that's been done, it's safe to say bringing the Wisconsin back to life has been more work than, well, a three-ring circus.
I think one other thing that everyone needs to know about this car is that about 80% of what you see here is original. Incredible, a car over 100 years old. We're only missing one window piece. Incredible statement of how this was just meant to be restored.
If you are ever standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona, there truly is quite a fine sight to see. It's not a girl in a flatbed Ford. It's a private rail car named the Louis Sockalexus.
They say the first time is always special, and this was the first car. It's got a lot of history. I mean, I watched my kids grow up as we built the car, so it does have a lot of special meaning to me.
Mike Solwitz is a doctor, but he's the first one to tell you he should have had his head examined for buying the Sockalexus.
I bought it because I was ignorant. This particular car was my first foray into railroad private car rebuilding, and I didn't know any better. I was enamored with the car. I liked the history of the car. I've always liked the Pennsylvania Railroad. I liked lounge cars and bedroom, so it had a little of both. But if I had it to do over again, I would have never bought this car. Subsequently, I bought 3 or 4 other cars and learned that what I had to do on this car was monumental compared to what most people have to do on their cars.
When Mike first bought the car in 1980, he thought it was a steal, especially at the price.
Don't let this get out, $1,000, which I had to justify to my wife, who thought I had lost my mind, and maybe I did. And then it's been a series of checks ever since.
You see, back then, the Sockalexus was not nearly the beauty it is today. In fact, the doctor says if the private rail car had been one of his patients, he would have told the ER nurse to prepare the family for the worst.
I would tell them, notify the family that the chance of this patient making it is probably 1 in 1,000.
The Sockalexus first hit the rails in the late 1940s as part of the Spirit of St. Louis on the Pennsylvania Railroad. It was a car on their flagship train from St. Louis to New York. Mike and his family spent 3 years working to rebuild the Sockalexus. Then he moved his medical practice and was forced to sell his very first precious private car.
I was busy setting up my practice and really didn't have the time to devote to the car, so I thought I probably should sell it. Maybe later on I'll get into another car.
Another car? Or the same car? Yep, Mike never lost track of his first love, and in 1994, believe it or not, he made a trade offer to get the Sockalexus back.
I've got this Mercedes. Would you be interested in trading the Mercedes for a railroad car? And we dickered back and forth for several months. I think I threw in a Jeep and a trailer as well, and we did the trade. My wife comes to see the car that she traded her Mercedes for, and all she can see is an empty car that looked just like it did when we sold it.
But Mike knew something his wife didn't know. The guy he got it back from had spent a ton of money to rebuild the undercarriage of the car.
He bought the car, and then he proceeded to literally rebuild this car structurally from the ground up. There are photos that show the car devoid of floors and walls. And you're looking at the main center beam of the car with the earth down below it as they stripped everything out and then put it back together.
Today, the Sockalexus is a picture of Art Deco perfection. The luxury lounge, once in ruins, is now littered with railroad classics. Etched glass reflects this grand car's glory days.
This sandblasting was taken off of a Pennsylvania Railroad schedule from the late 1940s.
One of Mike's greatest treasures is this replica of an old radio he and his grandfather used to listen to Cleveland Indian baseball games.
The name Louis Sockalexus was the Penobscot Indian who lived in Maine, who was a baseball player for, at that time, were the Cleveland Spiders. They later became the Cleveland Naps in honor of Napoleon Lajoie. And then in 1912, the Indians was the name that was picked in honor of Louis Sockalexus.
The Sockalexus celebrates the past, but embraces the future. The cold metal walls have been replaced with warm wood. 2 of the 3 bedrooms have been converted to mirror one another. They now have bunk beds and bookshelves. And there's a shiny new stainless steel kitchen. A labor of love that's turned a $1,000 investment into a lot of blood, sweat, and money.
There's well over $500,000 in the car. And any private car owner in the country will not blink an eye with that figure because they know what it takes to rebuild a car. Could you bleep that out for my wife?
Mike Sulwitz says his wife has actually been with him every step of the way. Even designed the special cabin doors.
A lot of people remark about the wooden doors, and then we have to tell them that these are metal doors that my wife managed to put a faux finish on.
But it was Mike's passion that wouldn't let the Sockalexus die. It must be the doctor in him.
The great pleasure I got out of having this car and the others was to be able to bring back to life something that was going to the scrap heap and see it run again.